Hi. So I'm going to be showing you how I made this rabbit pen for Mr. Buttons here. During this build, keep in mind that I don't have a lot of the power tools that are necessary, so there's no planer, no jointer, no belt sander, no router, no lathe, no bandsaw, drill press, you get the idea. So a lot of this is made with the bare minimum tools, but I do have a special tool, which is the new patent pending Andrew clamp, which we'll see in a minute. Alright, so in order to clamp the dovetail, this is where one of the benefits of the Andrew clamp comes in. Its prongs are sort of positioned in a way where you can add specific pressure to just the areas you want, just like that. And another clamp can sort of weave in here. I'll show you. Now we've finished making these two structural pieces here. What's next is to use an old chair leg to make the center beam there. Alright, so to help me attach this to this, I'm going to be using our prototype for the Andrew clamp. So as you can see, you'll be able to clamp it in place and still allow for a fastener. Let me show you. So one of the benefits as well is that it will actually collect dust for you, as opposed to it just spilling all over the place. It's very localized. The roof is going to be made from these. We're going to have a series of them coming along in a line this way. With two on the side. Now to attach these panels to the frame, we're going to be using these tiny little nails here. Now the way we're going to go about it is we're going to get a nail with one hand, use the palm to hold it in, and then just nail it in. Now ideally I'd be able to get some of these spring clamps and just for each one attach it in, but of course it obscures, you can't do anything with that. Which is the good news, that we'll be expanding the Andrew clamp range to include spring clamps. So in the future we will be able to just use spring clamps on each of these and still apply a fastener. But we'll start with the F clamps and then we'll move on from there. These we're going here. Now I'm going to be waterproofing this all with a product called Never Wet. I'll show you that later. So the frame is done, both sides and the middle beam, and we have the faces. Next we're going to make this side brace and this center piece here, which sort of cups into there. So what I want to do is I want to attach this part here to this frame here, and the way I'm going to be doing that is using an Andrew clamp. Ideally I'd have two, so one there and then one there, and then I'll just be able to fasten them in. Now the Andrew clamp definitely made that a lot easier, so I'm going to be using the same thing for all of those joints. So I'm going to be gluing this piece into this area here. Alright, so now that it's in place, we need to clamp it in. So how do we clamp this? This is actually another feature of the Andrew clamp. Now given how its hands, or its prongs, sorry, its fingers, whatever you call them, are placed just in the right position, we can actually grip the edges quite comfortably and apply just the right amount of force on sphere-shaped and corners, so it's very useful when it comes to gluing up. You have a very secure, very strong, comfortable, and kind of pretty joint. With the roof now completed, and I really like that design, I think it looks quite nice, we can start work on the frame, which we'll start doing now. So for clamping up the boards, we're going to be using all of our clamps here, so this is all we've got. We're also going to be using the Andrew clamp here. Now the Andrew clamp has a really good feature, given its design, where you can actually apply more clamps and then produce a greater clamping force, since the head of the jaw here is actually weavable with a lot. Now I can't demonstrate that practically, since this is the only prototype that we have manufactured. This is the original prototype that I came up with when I first had the idea. But I can illustrate this. So when clamping a board, if we apply an Andrew clamp here, now what we're going to be doing is we're going to trace the outline. So here we've traced the outline. Now if we were to flip it around, now once it's flipped around, we can see that we can actually weave it in. As you can see, we just traced it in. And if we flip it over and we had another Andrew clamp, we can actually keep continuing the weave. I'm just going to trace this for a few more just to illustrate. So here we can see how Andrew clamps can be weaved together to apply a much greater and evenly distributed force. Edge pieces, we have later forms coming out such as the V form, and they will be ideal for edge pieces using this pattern with the U form. Now an additional benefit is that if you have some boards which you need to glue together and there's a very significant warp, now you'd want to compress them flush. Now the Andrew clamp can actually allow you to use the power of two clamps in the one area, and let me demonstrate that. So here we have just a clamp placed in, so imagine this is an area where warp is significant. What we're going to do is trace the top jaw and the shoe of the bottom. So here we have the top jaw and the shoe traced. Now if this area is quite stubborn and one clamp isn't going to do it, you can actually use two clamps in one area. Let me demonstrate. So here you can see you could have applied two clamps in the one area. The top jaw goes around the shoe and the shoe goes in between the top jaw. So here it would be possible to apply the force of two clamps in the one area. I don't know any other clamp that can do that. I went ahead and glued up a second board, again using all the clamps I've got. And then we're going to be using this to make the frame. As far as attaching these together, there's numerous ways you can do it. Now what we're going to be using is the Andrew clamp, since a regular clamp, the head of the jaw will prevent you from applying any fasteners by obscuring that whole area. But an Andrew clamp, as I'll show in a second, so as you can see, it provides a very secure hold and still allows you to apply a fastener, just like that. Now compare that with the traditional clamp. A traditional clamp does provide a strong hold, though its force is quite specific, whereas the Andrew clamp is much more evenly distributed, and you can't apply a fastener, whereas the Andrew clamp you can apply a fastener. Alright, so the side pieces, they are doweled in and glued in. And the roof is going to come along. Alright, so the roof is going to be resting on the frame. The frame still needs a bit more work, namely this piece here and these cross beams, which are going to be a half lap joint here with a drawboard in the middle, and then there's the 4 legs and just the final support pieces, and we should be done. Alright, so with the roof done and the main parts of the frame done, all we have to do is add the cross brace. So I use a jigsaw to cut these pieces out, so they're going to be placed in this sort of formation, and then I'll be using a drawboarding in the center. So I used a jigsaw to cut these parts out and a file to draw file it and keep it nice and square. Unfortunately there is a little bit of slack in the corners, so I'll be using some of these strips to wedge them in place. Now while I have the other piece drying, I'm going to just be adding one cross beam on this piece, and I'll be using screws here and here. In order to do that, I'll be using the Andrew clamp. So as you can see, Andrew clamp holds it in place, gives you plenty of space on a narrow workpiece as well. Unbeatable. So you want to add the dowel right there. So we're going to be using the Andrew clamp to get it in place. So the Andrew clamp's upper head has these markings on it, which mean that you can always maintain your point of reference. So the line that we've made will actually line up with the lines on the top jaw, and they also transfer, I don't know if you can see that, they transfer on the rubber covering. So we're going to be applying a drawboard in the very center. So I've applied my sacrificial piece to prevent tear out and to prevent it drilling into the shoe. So let's go ahead and add it down. As you can see, there is a mess, but it's quite contained. Alright, so we've glued up the dowel. Alright, so to hammer this in, I'll be using my great granddad's hammer. As you can see, it's bigger than the other hammer here, and I'm using it to illustrate the fact that the upper head accommodates the majority of hammer sizes, so even a much bigger one here. Alright, with the cross brace now drawboarded, glued and trimmed, you can start attaching it to the frame. Now again, we're going to be using the Andrew clamp, and since there's 2 joints, it would be a good opportunity for me to demonstrate the difference between a traditional clamp and an Andrew clamp. Here the traditional clamp is holding it securely in place, but it's preventing the possibility of adding a fastener at the same time. With the Andrew clamp, you can see that it's holding it firmly in place. It's got a wider and more even distribution force and allows you to apply a fastener, and will also collect the dust foil. As you can see, not much you can do there. Alright, so the next part we're going to do is we're going to make the door to the pen, and what it's going to be, it's going to be 2 board, a sheet of MDF cut in the middle with hinges on the side, and it's going to be opened like that. So we've added the doors to the front. Next step is to add the latch to prevent Mr. Noodles from getting in or out. So I've added the latch, which works as expected. Problem is that there's a weakness that opens just like that, so as a security measure I made this cross, which goes like that, and prevents that from happening. With the roof and body completed, what we have to do now is use a mesh, which is here with some chicken wire. And we're going to use that to cover all of the areas so Mr. Buttons cannot get out. Alright, so the mesh is all completely installed on the inside. So the next part is we're going to attach the base to the roof, and we're going to make sure that's removable, so we're using screws. So all the sharp pointy bits that were cut off using the tin snips, they are now covered with the hot glue, including the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do the final step, which is create a coating of protection, and we're going to be using, like I mentioned earlier, a product called Never Wet. So we've shaken the base coat for 1 minute. So now that we've got our base coat done, it's time for our top coat. So the rabbit pen is now coated with Never Wet. Now what Never Wet does is it turns anything it's sprayed on hydrophobic. Now to illustrate what that means, I also coated this piece of paper with the Never Wet. So if we were to get some water, as you can see, it completely runs off and is really dry. So this entire thing is now hydrophobic, so if it's in the rain and gets wet, it won't get wet. Now this resists moisture, it resists rust, so it's very, very well protected. So as an extreme example, I bent the pages in so it's more like a bowl and added some water. So this is water and it's completely waterproof. So thanks for watching the build video for Mr. Button's new rabbit pen. If you enjoyed the video, especially the Andrew clamp, please like, share and subscribe, since this is the best place to get information, as well as our Facebook and Instagram page and our website, www.andrewclamp.com. Thanks for watching.